Welcome to another episode of Life on Mars. I'm Alex, CEO and founder of MarsBased, and in this episode we bring you Fabio Basile, one UI UX designer I've been following for a good while on Twitter, super specialized in UX UI and usability, and right now also with a huge interest in artificial intelligence. Why we brought Fabio into this podcast is because, first of all, we like interviewing friends of the company, but also because for me, he's one of the very few people who posts really interesting UX, UI stuff on Twitter on a consistent basis. And I find him to be very organic and very transparent, and you will see it in this conversation. He is very honest about the stuff he does. There's a lot of fluff in UX UI like there is in so many other aspects of business out there, but I find him to be very transparent and very honest about his work and what he can do, what he cannot, and what his limitations are. So we have a very good conversation about how to find clients doing UX UI, how to build a portfolio, which is something that we share in common with UX UI and designers, because sometimes the projects we design, the projects we build at MarsBased are never launched. Our internal tools are protected by NDAs, are super secret projects, are projects that are, whose company dies because they ran out of funding before launching, right? So this is very difficult in the early days of building an agency. We discuss that, we discuss budgets, we discuss how to separate the grain from the chaff in terms of UX UI, in terms of trends, the case of all of these companies that have ripped off linear, how to stay on top of the news, and how to carefully select and pick an agency or freelancers for UX UI, red flags, what things can you assess or ask them when you are actually evaluating potential partners, potential providers for your projects, and more. So if you want to stay on top of news of UX UI, you want to see what's hot, what's interesting, and where's the real substance in UX UI, you gotta follow this conversation with Fabio and I. So without further ado, let's jump right into this episode. So it's gonna be fun because me coming from Barcelona, you coming from Sicily, but based in the UK, it'll be fun. We have a common language, which is Italian. We're gonna be switching to English now. It's gonna be violent.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, before the podcast, we chatted in Italian. I was really surprised by your level of Italian and your accent. It's just, next level.
And thanks. But it's really funny because for me, that's one of the things I find as a multilingual person, that's one of the things I struggle the most with, right? Is I know you and I have got this language in common, but we got to switch to English because of the podcast. It happens to me with my co-founders. We speak in Catalan every day. And we got to, then we record something in the podcast in English or in Spanish. It's super violent. How was the cultural shock for you when you moved to the UK, in which you have been for 20 years now?
Yes, it was quite a cultural shock. I left when I was 18. I just about finished my higher education. And I had this thing in my mind where I wanted to go into video games from a technical point of view. So when I was playing video games, I was basically playing video games with friends and my brother. I used to analyze the little details like a nerd, basically saying, why does that thing work that way? So how do characters move in a video game? All those little things. And so that inspired me to learn C++. At that time, I was very much into let's learn how everything works. So C++, DirectX, OpenGL, get an idea of get a sense. And you look puzzled at the moment because you thought I was a designer and that's it.
Exactly. That's exactly my thoughts right now. You read my mind.
Yeah, exactly. No. So I started as a developer because due to video games, pretty much. So at that time, I found some universities over here in the UK, and they were very one of the first that I could find online that actually offered video games development course. And so I thought, you know what, I was 18, I left Sicily for the first time. It's I'm just going to adventure a different place. And so basically I came over here, studied games development. And then I worked a little bit for Studio Liverpool, it was called. It was part of Sony. I think Sony bought them out. They were the ones that made the Formula One games at that time. And so I've learned about those. I used to do Python scripting then, but during my course, it was a bit of C++ and the DirectX. So it was quite technical. And then, obviously, on top of that, there was a cultural differences, obviously coming from Sicily, the weather, the food, the people, like the behavior, all of that stuff.
The language.
The language, exactly.
It's like you move from Sicily, which is like, a slightly different kind of Italian, into like, I don't know if you landed in Manchester, which is a different kind of English that the rest of the UK speaks. It's like, you don't get to speak neither of those two languages, right? But did you, like, funnily enough, I think we've got some things in common here, but like, did you learn English before landing in the UK and through video games? Because then you're like, you and I are the same person.
Exactly. Through video games, music. I used to like Eminem, for example, like rap music and some metal songs and television, cartoons, like whatever I could watch in English, I would at that time. And Japanese as well, because that's my other thing.
Geez. Yeah. Okay, that's totally a language I don't speak. Like, we could probably
don't speak either.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny because one of the things I saw some similarities with my profile and my background in your story. However, one of the things that turned me away from learning how to code video games was actually, I took some courses in it. So I studied at Pompeu Fabra University, which is the first university to offer a master's in video game development in Europe.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, I love video games. Back then I was totally hooked into like Guild Wars, Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, all of the RPG games. I was like, I will totally work on that. And I took some courses like, this is shit.
Yes.
It's so bad. It's just like pure math all the time.
It is. Yeah, I completely with you.
But you loved it. Did you like it? Because I did.
No,
okay.
I didn't like it. I only did it because I thought it was the only way you could actually get in video games. Like, I couldn't understand how people would just go them like that directly into like video gaming industry without like a master's or without a bachelor degree or something like that. But I was wrong. And my recommendation would be don't go to uni for video games. I think there's so much content and material that you can learn it from scratch online.
Or maybe nowadays, right? Like that's one of the like people tell me like, do you actually regret going to uni? It's like, well, no, because if I am here today, it's probably because I went there. I don't know how it would have gone otherwise, but like without uni, I wouldn't have done Erasmus. Without Erasmus, probably I wouldn't have been so entrepreneurial. I wouldn't have lived abroad, and then gave me the connections and the ideas to start a company, right? And so, in a sense, it's like, no, I don't regret it, but I'm pretty positive that nowadays people don't need it that much. But before that, there was a lot of social validation. I don't know what year were you born. I'm 87. So when I started working here, they were like, yeah, but you got to have a degree. Otherwise, you cannot aspire to have this salary, right? You will be capped. The salary is something in Spain we call titulitis, which is like you have to have titles, right? And the title's so much like super prized and sought after. Not anymore. But 15 years ago when I started working, yeah. So was it your case?
Yeah, absolutely. From 85, so only 2 years difference.
Yeah, so in Italy, we share a lot in common with.
Yeah, exactly the same. And also, I think it was, I don't know, even my parents, I think it was a thing of like, oh, if you have a degree, if you have a title after your name or something like that, it just makes, gives you more credibility, as you were saying. So that was in my mind. But I changed that, obviously, and things have moved on. And
you moved into like UX UI. That's something that you, you have been riffing on for so many years. Your LinkedIn profile is impressive. One of the things you claim on your Twitter profile is that you designed the first Bumble app. And as a hardcore user of Bumble in the past, which actually has given my present girlfriend, I'm super grateful for. I think like I gotta thank you somehow. Like you gave birth to that thing. So how did it feel to be sort of the one of the persons super involved in one app that has made it so big?
Yeah, so I like to say, obviously, it wasn't like my idea for the design itself. Obviously, there was a team already existing. There was a team in place, and I was approached to expand on what they created And so they already had the brand, they had a visual language and everything, and then expanded over onto iOS and Android. But my focus was mostly on Android, even though I wasn't an Android user. I'm not an Android user. I couldn't.
You're a designer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like whatever. Just yeah. So I could not decline the offer because, like, Bumble. I mean, I knew the person that was behind, and I know she was involved with Tinder, and this was like she then left, and she got fired. I think there was some like.
There was quite a story of.
There is exactly. Yeah. And the funny thing is, not funny for me though, is that they actually offered some shares in exchange of the services because it was still quite early stage, and I declined it. I declined the shares. Yeah.
Well, you never know. It's a lottery, and like I don't. Blame
it
you,
is. It is. And I needed the money at that time as well, so I'm like, no, like keep your shares, and then I just work on the UI. But yeah, that was a long time ago.
But yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it's like, oh, you should have done this. Like the guy who passed on investing on Facebook, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, looking back, everybody knows how to build things, but in the moment, it's hard. It's hard to do that. However, like there must be some things that there's got to be some sort of recognition because you have been freelancing for a while. You had your studio, and one of the things that gives me most frustration about building stuff for other people is that oftentimes, I don't know what percentage of your portfolio you build and it never gets released, or it gets released, doesn't have an impact, or it gets thrown away because it was an MVP, or it just doesn't have success. It ends up in the recycle bin of history. And it's like, shit, like I think that is really cool shit. We built, the first 2 years of MarsBased was basically building stuff for companies that never released, or they ran out of money before finishing product. And then it's like, okay, show me your portfolio. It's like, well, we've got all these so crazy profile like designs and apps, but we cannot show them because the motherfuckers didn't launch or they couldn't drive a business, right? So must be really satisfactory to have the badge of having worked on Bumble. But how did you deal with the frustration of these unreleased apps, unreleased designs, things that never saw the light of day?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And I think when I speak to people that started now or they want to open studios and things like that, it's just something that really doesn't get discussed much. Even on social media, I'm quite active on Twitter, as you know, but not many people will actually say, by the way, all this amazing stuff that you create as a designer, and even, like your team developed the amazing stuff, but then either it gets butchered by the in-house team of your clients, or maybe, as you said, your clients run out of money and then basically cannot publish anything. And I feel like it's a topic that doesn't really get discussed much, but it's important because when I, for example, I've got a side studio at the moment as well. So something that I'm overseeing, or almost like a director of the board, but I don't really do design actively. So I just look after the projects and kind of the biz dev side of things. And even then, when we send our kind of pitch across, a lot of that stuff that we display cannot even be referenced online because changed completely. Even if it's like 6 months old, everything has changed. And so we have to explain to like potential customers that things have changed, or maybe they were not developed by us or like a partner development studio, and so they were completely changed after. So yeah, I don't know how. Sorry, I was going to say. Thank you. I was going to say, I don't know how to deal with that, really, apart from just explaining things have changed, pretty much.
Yeah, and the other thing is like things that you built like 7 years ago, they might not look very fancy today. Like in the design, it's even worse. Like it gets outdated so quickly, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it happens to us that we don't really design shit, but like sometimes we got on our website, on whatever, we got portfolio, oh, we built this app, or somebody referenced me this app. It's like, yeah, but don't take a look at that. Or the design is not ours, we built the back end. Right? Yeah. And they're like, oh, your front end is not very good. It's like, yeah, we didn't design that, motherfucker. We just like didn't ask. So that's why you got to be super explicit about what you do, precisely because a lot of agencies, and it's a really good point that you bring this up, that nobody talks about this. So let's riff on it a little bit, is that a lot of agencies just mention client, like we work for this client, or we did this site, but they don't really make explicit what part they work on. Was it as you mentioned, like Bumble, but Bumble for Android, okay, or that version, or we did only the backend for this. We did some consulting, right? And so I think like if everybody made like contributed with their part, and they said like, oh, we only work on this part, could be easier, and we wouldn't have to explain it so much.
Exactly. But that comes to, I think it's also like personal marketing. I think there is the idea of, for example, I'm a quite introverted person. So it takes me a long time to, or even mentally, to like focus and just say, oh, I've worked on this. Even on the Twitter profile, to even mention those things. It just, I don't know, like I look at that and I feel a little bit, oh, I don't know, am I boasting? Is it something that I should remove from there? But then, you know, when you think that obviously you need to sell yourself, you need to sell your services, then it makes sense. You know, maybe you don't want to be that precise. You don't want to be like, oh, I only worked on the back end. Let people ask you about that. Like, let potential customers find out only if they need to. Just impress them. Just say, okay, cool. You worked on, I don't know, the NASA website. But it could have been like on a tiny, tiny part of the NASA website. It doesn't matter. I think it just brings the interest and the conversation then starts.
Exactly. Like for us, we got a saying here around Barcelona. It's like everybody works for FC Barcelona. Eventually, you end up working for FC Barcelona. We work for FC Barcelona. But people just put the logo, and even like they are super anal about you cannot reference anything. You cannot speak about, or you know, you cannot link to your work, and so a lot of people just put the logo there and they don't say anything, of course, but then it gives the impression that you work for FC Barcelona. And I know the case of a company which just literally designed one icon. I think it was like the desktop app icon or something like that. That's the only thing they did. And it's like, of course we work for FC Barcelona. I got an invoice from them. So.
Exactly. You just show, you go proof.
It's terrible. Some clients, like what we mentioned, right? Some projects, they were never launched. Some projects are internal tools which are not publicly accessible. And then you got others that by contract, you cannot speak about them. It's like, give me a fucking break. How the fuck am I going to build a portfolio if I got all of these restrictions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other risk of NDAs. Like, for example, I don't freelance so much right now. So I do consulting and I'm very picky who I work with. Sometimes in the past I used to get NDAs and they were really restrictive because I think like who would read that stuff? You know, you wouldn't go in the small text and try to understand. You're not a lawyer. It's not your job to really understand all of that. But there was some really bizarre clauses like you cannot work with a similar company for the next 12 years or like it's like come on,
it's bonkers.
Exactly. It's like you're basically asking me to stop working forever just because I'm working on your project right now. So yeah, that's another thing.
Sounds like I'm losing money there, right? It's like
exactly.
Oh, yeah, you cannot work for any other company in the field of mobility for 3 years. It's like what the fuck does that mean? Like,
exactly.
Then I'm not gonna take your 10 grand project and lose a total addressable market of millions of dollars just because of your 10K project. Like, sounds like I'm losing there. Yeah, NDAs are totally crazy. I mean, I don't know what's your take on this. Our advice is, as an agency or contractor, don't sign NDAs unless it's like a really, really big client that, you know, requires it because it's like FC Barcelona, HP, like a super corporate client that you want to work for and it changes your life. Do it. Then they will never check whether you've worked for somebody else. But if it's a tiny ass startup that is asking for that, it's like, no, mate, I'm sorry, this is a rookie mistake. And you're signaling that you are a rookie if you're asking me as an investor or as an agency owner. I'm not going to sign an NDA because that might drive me out of business. So I don't have any upside in signing this.
100%. Yeah, exactly that. It definitely shows if you're a tiny one-person studio type of thing or like startup, just sending an NDA is like, nah, no chance. I mean, it shows how like, yeah, inexperienced they are. Exactly.
Let's talk about like something that maybe it sounds very, very, I don't know how to put it. It's not controversial, but it's definitely in the zeitgeist of nowadays. I know this question gets. It's too cheesy, I'm afraid. But people want to hear proper answers. It's like, will AI take away the jobs of designers?
I was expecting that.
You were expecting that. And I feel bad about asking that. But I've got a hot take on this. But I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, I think it's definitely fair to ask. I know a lot of people, even, I don't know, maybe Twitter does, or the media in general makes it sound, I don't know, a lot worse than what it is. I do like the use of AI. So
Investors are
the
the
investors,
megaphones of
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I like the use of AI. So, for example, in the various teams I'm part of, I use it almost every day. So today, for example, I just signed up to ChatGTP Plus. It's available in the UK without waiting for in the waiting list. So I subscribe to that one, and I use it regularly for a lot of stuff. And I think it's important to. And I know it's gonna take some jobs in the future. I'm pretty sure of that. Maybe, I don't know, copywriting or ideation, or even, some crazy stuff that I came across the other day. Some guy created a Chrome plugin for scraping pages using ChatGTP, and it was it was a demo, so I don't know if it was real or not, but it looked incredible. So even that would probably remove the need for some scraping APIs or services or something like that. I don't know. But in terms of design, there are a few companies that are doing some really cool stuff. I can't think, there is one company right now that integrated AI in Figma. I just cannot think of the name. Is it Diagram?
Yeah.
No, I can't remember.
I get it, yeah, tip of the tongue, but
Yeah, I definitely can't remember.
anyways,
But
we'll add it to the show notes, yeah.
yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think they are going to be useful more than stealing jobs of designers and developers and so on. So I think for example, in Figma, sometimes my struggle is spending too much time finding the right iconography. Some clients obviously don't have the budget for, or even the time for you to create iconography from scratch. And so even just using AI to generate some sort of icon, and then using it as a placeholder, could be in a wireframe, it could be some prototype that you just want to send across quickly. Having something that quick, it just is amazing, I think. And that already exists. It's a plugin in Figma. I just cannot remember the name. But yeah, I think
No worries.
there's no big risk. Yeah, there's no big risk right now. That's what I feel like, but I might be naive. I don't know.
I think, for one, I think it will take away parts of the job that are commoditized, right? Some designers, or designers, coders, whatever, copywriters, are just commodities. They don't add any proper value to what you're trying to build, and they can be replaced by an AI. But they will be forced to move forward and do something in a more, let's say, in a higher scale, or reinvent themselves. For me, I don't see the destruction of a field. I see it's going to bring new people who couldn't afford these services to the field, because we'll lower the barriers, right? So the barriers of entry of a good designer are super expensive. They got super long waiting list and whatnot. So maybe by allowing them to kind of outsource, automate, delegate more stuff onto the AI, maybe they will be able to work for smaller clients or offer a wider range of free services that these other people that they were never addressed to, they had never access to this kind of thing. So in a sense, it's opening the gates to a new community. And I don't know, for me, I heard a really good analogy by Jason Calacanis, which is obviously somebody controversial, but I deeply respect him and admire him in so many ways. That he says, this is kind of like GPS. It was supposed to eliminate drivers and whatnot, and just people are so fucking dumb that they were just driving into cornfields because the GPS told them, turn right here. There's obviously no road. And people are just blindly following them. So if you're just blindly following AI, you're not going to be the best designer around, right? You still need that human component to make it better and to do your job. So
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And there is also the point of the prompts, right? So there is now we're seeing people start setting prompts, for example, because it's another skill set that you have to learn to make sure that you get the right results back. So that is opening another, I guess, side hustle, side industry, which nobody expected maybe 6 months ago to happen.
Exactly. Give me two or three use cases of ChatGPT before we move into kind of the UX UI side of things.
Yeah, so one of them that I use regularly is tidying up data. So for example, if I get a lot of data from my biz dev who goes online and scrapes or downloads data from, for example, I don't know, Crunchbase. We want to look at companies that we want to pitch to or cold email, whatever it might be. The data isn't structured. Obviously, if we are kind of the cheap side. So if you pay for the premium plan, Crunchbase will give you CSVs, so you can download them. But if you want to stay on the cheap side, you can actually copy the content from the website. And then you can post it on ChatGTP, ask it to create a table for you, and then give it to you as a CSV as well. So that removes all the complexity of doing everything manually. So that's one great use case. The other use case is copywriting. Just in terms of, obviously English is not my main language, but I like to ask on top of, for example, Grammarly, Hemingway, like various apps, to help me with certain kind of contexts or some copy that I want to write. So it's either micro copy for websites, apps, or for landing pages, just to give me the start, like the spark, the main idea to make me to get me started on like writing something additional. So instead of using the like lorem ipsum, I just go and ask for like proper content, because I hate lorem ipsum. Like whichever designer uses lorem ipsum, like you should stop. And just go
it's
and use
not
the
anymore.
ChatGPT.
Like you got plenty of tools, plenty of add-ons for your app of choice to generate text.
Exactly, but believe me, people still use that. So I don't
Still
know.
use that.
Yeah, they use that.
And one of the things that I was pleasantly surprised about is that you somehow mix the designer part of things with your developer profile, or your developer learnings, right? And so one of my I think it's easier to work for us, for me as a technical person, even though we work with designers who don't know how to code, we find it's usually better to work with them, because sometimes graphic designers who don't know the implications of coding, they end up designing things that are super complicated to code. Maybe then the downside is that they lose on creativity, right? Mm-hmm. Their designs are not as spectacular precisely because they know somebody's gonna code them. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, I can give you a personal instance, for example, where in the past I've won contracts due to my background. A lot of clients would ask, do you know how to work with developers? And then I explain my background, and that would basically win me the contract, because as you were saying, some of the designers would just not be able to understand, the restrictions that you might have in code. But creativity wise, I don't know. I think I love to design outside my working hours if it's a project that I want to launch, like if it's something for myself. So I still go, I guess like you guys maybe want to code something, you do like loads of little side projects. So I do that also because sometimes with design, designing for clients or working with companies, you got restrictions of what you can do. And maybe you can't follow the latest trends and you want to try, I don't know, glass morphism or something crazy that you can't really do in your main job. So I tend to do those things. And I feel, even myself, I feel like, this is a bit too silly. Like, I know it cannot be developed, but maybe try, like, see what happens. I don't care. I'm never going to develop this thing. So I don't know. I think there's a balance. I just don't know if some people might get pushed back by the knowledge of things that can be decoded or not. I'm not sure. Also because for example, I don't do front-end coding.
You're not web designer. You're not web developer.
Exactly.
Some C++, which doesn't really give you insight. Gives you insight on coding, but not on web coding, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I keep myself informed with like Next.js and React and all of that. I just want to understand how it works, and I do tutorials occasionally. Okay. But it's still something that I can't say I'm an expert. So even then, I still kind of ignore the restrictions, and I still go ahead and do cool stuff. And then we maybe have to pull it back and say, hey, no, this is a bit too fancy for the time that we have available and all of that.
Yeah, like I gave a really stupid example, but it's pretty explicit. Like sometimes we've worked with designers in the past, and they were showing us the design, and you see two forms on the same page. It's like no, like no. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, you could have it. No one has it because it's difficult to code. It doesn't make sense even from the user experience side. It's like, what are you gonna do? Like, do they save on the same page? Do they redirect that this one redirects you to another page, or do they stay on the same? Like, which one takes priority? It's stupid. Looks cool. Looks amazing. But the other question is like in terms of like trends, right? Because it's really hard to stay on top of trends. And one tweet that caught my attention this week is you're probably familiar with an app called Linear, right?
I love
You know
Linear.
what
Yes.
Yeah, Linear is a super amazing app. Like we switched to Linear one year and a half ago, and like literally we do everything on Linear now. The design's pretty groundbreaking, even though they didn't design this trend. They didn't invent this trend of like dark mode landing pages, super like neon, because Superhuman already started with that. So this
Yes.
kind of like new high scale productivity boosting on steroids apps, like, and they are a little bit elitist, if you know, like 30 euros per month to pay for an email client. Fuck me, that's really expensive, but they're really good products. However, there was this tweet that caught my attention in which like somebody, like so many companies ripped off the design of Linear. Like sometimes even like the same, moon hovering on something, the neon this, and even the copy. It's like, wow, man, like how do you balance this out in terms of like, yeah, I want to be inspired by this kind of trend, but I want to put my style in. How do you blend these two things together?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's difficult for even experienced designers to, in a way, remove yourself from the stuff that has inspired you that you see online. So the thing about Linear, it's interesting because I think there's also a website now that lists all the websites that look like Linear.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was the same. Yeah. There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
Some have changed. They have reverted back to the old design because, we outsourced this to an agency. Like,
exactly. That's the
dude,
excuse. Yeah, that's the excuse.
Yeah, somebody approved that shit,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think one point is, and actually was in a tweet, someone asked the same question, and the reply by someone else was because they convert. So the conversion rate is great.
Yes.
So cool. Okay, that makes sense if you look from a business point of view. But if you are a senior designer in-house, like personally, I've had requests. So last year I was consulting for a startup, went through Y Combinator, and the same thing happened. They were like, we love Linear. Please do everything you can to make it look like Linear. To me, I didn't quite agree. Obviously, you can pick elements and you can say, okay, it's dark. Okay, it's got a grid at the top. And the grid is very like, I don't know, 80s vibe, Tron, the kind of like
that synth
perspective.
pop, synth wave.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of neon colors. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's also a little bit of Apple, with the kind of rounded cards as you scroll down. So it's a mixture of styles, and I will not attribute that to Linear either. I think the design team got inspiration probably from Apple, the other websites as well. So the tricky thing as a designer is obviously you get inspired by a lot of stuff that you see, but then how do you move away from too much inspiration? You're like, obviously try and design something new with your unique style, but while still being inspired and maybe keeping it as a trend. I think that's really tricky. And lots of people manage to do that. A lot of other people don't. And then it comes out as it's a rip-off. It looks exactly the same.
Yeah, because I can understand that it's a really good point. Like 5-10 years ago, everybody was ripping off Stripe's landing pages,
Yes.
right? So because Stripe was the perfect use case and it converted so much, and now it's Linear, and in 5 years it will be somebody else. But the point being, like, it must be a really difficult thing to decide on, because on the one hand, it's like, I know if I rip them off, I get immediate results. Conversions, signups, downloads, whatever, and business is happy. Leadership is happy. I'm going to get my paycheck. If I stray away too much from this, I am on the one hand, I might become the outlier who creates a new trend, but the chances are so astronomically small that maybe you are like, doesn't work, and why didn't you follow this? Because one of the things that you probably get a lot as a designer is like, everybody knows how to design, right? Everybody knows how to give opinions on design, right? And so
Definitely.
it must be really hard to balance these long-term thinking versus these short, immediate-term results that people are like, yeah, if you do this, it works. Versus maybe I'm gonna give it a try. Maybe I get a chance at breaking out with something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's also your investors. I think it's something that comes right from the top. They might like something. They're not very technical people, so they might just see something that is trending at the moment, maybe something that is in their portfolio as well. So, if, I don't know, the same investor invested in Linear and now is investing in your company, maybe it's like, okay, Linear works, then why don't you do the same for the other portfolio company, whatever it might be. And it has happened to me in the past as well. So there's a request coming from the top. So I think you have to have that right combination of freedom from, for example, investors, or maybe it's a bootstrap project, and also freedom from like time freedom, all of that, to make something so unique and different. Then you maybe start a new trend.
How about one of the things, and switching gears here, whenever companies approach us and we're not the right fit, or maybe they don't have the budget, we don't have capacity, I like to be useful, at least to them, and give them some tips on how to find other agencies and how to assess whether they're good fits or not, or whether they're going to be just pirates, right? And so very basic things that not everybody does, like, code and IP is yours from the get-go, not after the last paycheck, right? Or make sure they have these in place. They are an LLC. They have this, and blah 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 blah. I always give them like 5 to 10 indications as to how to pick the grain from the chaff, right? How about when people are looking for a UX UI person or agency? What are the things that could be considered red flags, or do you advise people to kind of like ask them about?
Yeah, so I might be wrong in thinking this, and please correct me if I say something stupid. But I feel that because design nowadays is so commoditized, everybody feels they know a little bit about design. Like everybody can design.
Everybody calls themselves UX UI expert, right?
Exactly. So there was a meme a while ago where like you're working with a client and the client says, "Oh, let me ask my niece or my nephew, and I'll get back to you with feedback." That has changed. I think now everyone has an opinion. Obviously, it's visual. So for us, maybe in code, you can hide a few things. Like if the code is not super clean, if you have to cut corners, that's fine. In design, you can't really do that. So you immediately going to get an opinion from clients, basically. And what I found is it also shows on the first interaction that you have with potential new clients. And so the red flags, there are definitely a few. There is everything from the type of questions they ask to the payment terms. If they... I had one the other day when asked, basically required us to do like a demo design for them, which was unpaid. And if we were a good fit, then we can work together. Definitely red flag there. Yeah. There is communication breakdowns. So we send an email back, we don't hear for like 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they rush, say, "Oh, we want to start tomorrow," straight away, like super pushy. You already get a sense of like maybe they're going to be micromanaging you, and they're not ideal customers either. And obviously things change even for them, but there are small things that I guess you learn over the years, which is difficult to articulate. But yeah.
That's how to select clients, but how about selecting agencies? Like if you were to advise somebody to find an agency or a UX UI provider, what would you have them ask or, detect?
Good question. So for agencies, obviously the portfolio, and going back to what we discussed before as well, maybe understand what they did on a particular project. So if you see the portfolio work for Microsoft, okay, what did you do for Microsoft? Which department? Like, try and have a breakdown of that and get a good understanding. The other very good point, I think that a lot of agencies get quite, easy with that is passing, and it's well known. So passing you to a junior designer once you sign a contract.
Oh,
yeah. That's the thing. It's a big one. So that maybe make sure, obviously there's so much you can find out, but make sure who the designers are. If they've got a good profile online, maybe try and find them personally and just see if they are those people that they're working, on your project. Potentially any social media, maybe any understanding of how they interact with users. Sometimes I've had agencies working with us that were very rude to our clients. So the communication broke down immediately, and they actually start swearing at clients in Slack. And so we immediately, so there's no ideal, but we didn't know until we actually worked with them. So there's definitely lots of little things that potentially you could do. But I don't know if that answers your question. I know there's, some of the things are quite tricky.
It does. And precisely, just very basic things can just help to, balance a decision one way or another. And I think most people are not experienced, and they just Google and find this person. Usually, if agencies are too good on SEO, they are just too marketing oriented. They have sales representative, and that means that they have to have a lot of clients to keep the business going, but they don't get margin, or they don't renew their clients. Whereas if they are really expensive and they have like a waiting list, or they have this sort of boutique feeling like we do, for instance, that means that we never lose our clients. It's not like we don't care to get new clients, but we don't need them. So we kind of like can cherry pick. And therefore, that means that we never lose our clients because we got on retainer. Usually, if they work on retainer, that's a good sign as well. So I wanted to understand whether it works the same way with designers. And it's good advice. Understanding what part of the portfolio, like we mentioned at the beginning, that's really important. The other thing is like about budgets, right? Because UX, UI, and development obviously fight a lot about budgets, and as you mentioned, in UX UI you cannot cut corners, and unfortunately in coding you can cut corners. Like, you shouldn't, but most people, they're like, we don't have money for testing, don't test. They're like, well, we don't like that, but it's your decision. You understand the risk. They don't understand the risk most of the times. But you can't cut corners there. No one's going to see it unless it blows up, and then you fix it. You cross the river when you reach the river, right? Design, it's just there, Maybe you can cut corners by not creating an animation somewhere or secondary pages, but you cannot do that. How do you find the balance between, when people come with MVP ideas and you're like, they think it's an MVP, but it's not really an MVP. It's the most ambitious project. It's an MAP, right? They come with all of this, and it has to have this. It's like, dude, that's not a minimum. Where's the part of minimum you haven't understood in the MVP, right? How do you advise them to take things off the MVP list?
Yeah. So it really depends on a project basis, obviously. But we offer an initial stage where we charge a minimum fee to basically understand the MVP. So I understand the requirements. And we'll then go back to them and say, this is not an MVP, this is like a lot bigger than an MVP. So we either work together in reducing the complexity and the scope, or you need to bring in more budget, and then we're going to discuss, how to make your non-MVP a functioning prototype, potentially for investors or developers like yourselves. So there has to be this back and forth. And in the past, our mistake was we didn't charge for that process, and so it was a lot of time spent reviewing and then giving this information for free, which is a big mistake.
Yeah, but at the beginning, you cannot really, you don't have the reputation to charge for that initial setup, right? So
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
no
So
two
you
ways
have to
about it.
exactly,
Been there.
and yeah, yeah. And where now you can go from as little as, for example, 500 euros, because it's maybe going to be like 1 or 2 hours of your time, and just review everything, get back to the client, and just explain, and that will save them money and time, and obviously you have paid for the time that you spent on that. So yeah, that's kind of ideally what we usually do. I say ideally because it doesn't always happen. Sometimes even when we actually mention the review stage, some clients don't even want to pay that and just say, okay, no, then we want to work together. We won't be able to. So they're not.
Yeah, maybe then you lose some potential clients that might not be very good for your business. It's 50-50. Sometimes they are really good clients, but they just don't want to pay for that because nobody else in the industry charges for that, which is the difficulty that we are encountering, right? For the first 5 years, I think we never charged for that. And even though we tried always, but like nobody was like, yeah, I'm going to pay for a definition phase. No fucking way. And then eventually somebody paid for it. And I was like, okay, now we found a price. Then we charged double, and then people kept paying, and some people don't pay. Fine. We're not going to work on this because we've got so many other clients. But when you don't have a pipeline, of course you're going to take the free work, right?
Right, exactly. Like you just accept any type of projects or clients that you can.
How about like finding deal flow for a company like you? Because we're mentioning in the pre-chat, like in the warm up, that basically, so you got a large community on Twitter, and I find that whenever you build community, and we're a pretty community oriented company at MarsBased, organizing events, doing podcasts and whatnot, and we thought that was going to help us to find deal flow, and the deal flow doesn't come from there. We find a lot of talent though. How about you? Where do you get your deal flow from?
So for us, we're still working on through that because, as I told you before, I went through agency and then consulting, then agencies. So it's been quite different as a path, and a lot of so for example, even the way that we've been finding customers has changed over the years. And so for me, for example, if it was, I don't know, 3-4 years ago, Dribble was the main source of income for us.
Okay.
So every time we posted something on Dribble, we would get maybe 10 inquiries a week.
Nice.
So we were very selective. It was incredible. Then obviously the Dribble thing happened. So Tiny bought Dribble. They signed a new CEO, which is also a great guy, by the way. But I feel that because of the price increase and the way they changed the way that Dribble works, and then the massive income of like spam users and likes and all of that, a lot of designers moved away from Dribble, and so has decreased the quality of inquiries that you get, or the number of inquiries. So we have to adapt all the time. So right now, or even at my previous studio, we found the best way is to basically cold email. So we have a portfolio ready. Yeah. So find companies that potentially got investment recently. Look at the website if it looks terrible, or if they're hiring for a UI UX position, for example, or if you've been trying their apps and their app doesn't look as nice as it should or as it could, then then you just go and cold email them. You do a first.
I'll give you one. Wallapop from Spain. They're fucking awful.
Oh, they? Okay, I've heard of them. I've not used them.
Oh, geez. Like the app is terrible. Like it's probably a lot of like mixed design. But UX UI is horrible. It's been like this for 10 years. So I'll give you this one. They got a fuck ton of money.
Exactly. So that would be a good example to just go linked to with someone of the, maybe like head of product, head of marketing, someone that might be involved on LinkedIn. And then from there you start, kind of making connections, sending proposals, asking questions. And there's a full flow. Like we've been trying everything, and it's still, I can't say it works great, but there is a potential of having a nice system where you can almost automate it in a way and just get enough people to open your emails, check your portfolio, maybe you attach a PDF or something, and then kind of go from there.
How do you deal with the frustration coming from, some really, really big apps and projects making millions and millions, and they have like the most terrible design ever, like Craigslist or eBay. Or like in Spain, we got the famous case of Mercadona, right? A huge supermarket that they're proud of having the shittiest website ever because they are the largest supermarket. And it just works anyway because people just work there because they have a brand. But it's fucking awful. So how do you deal with that? How can you explain it to somebody who just like wants to spend a lot of UX UI and they haven't validated their business hypothesis?
It's frustrating as a designer, definitely. I think even if you look at Craigslist, as you mentioned, they got terrible design. It's something from like 1997. Or Amazon.
It's awful.
Amazon annoys me. That's another level of like, yeah. Craigslist, we know, and they never changed. It works for them, like, great. Yeah. Amazon, they do things on purpose that really annoy me. So even AWS, oh man, like you need.
Oh my God.
Yeah, yes.
Don't get me started on that. It's
exactly. Awful. So going to AWS is just another level of like usability. I don't know. You need to be, I don't know, like a degree in rocket science to use that website. But
Google Analytics, I'll give you this one as well.
Yes.
Jesus
yeah.
Christ. Google Ads. Google Ads is like,
Google Ads.
Where is the information? Like, I want to put in my credit card. I don't know where.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't want my money. There's another one which is LinkedIn sales funnel.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, you can't even
Stop
see
using it because it was so bad. But yeah.
Exactly, like what is the price? You can't see the price. You have to contact them. And it's also the contacting thing that really annoys me. It's like, show me, if it's a service that you sell, show me the price. Don't let me speak with people. Like I don't want to speak to like some random person just to find out how much it costs, to use your services.
So then related to this question is, when do you think is like the best moment for a company to start really spending on fine-tuning UX UI? Like for one, I always said like ship something stupid and it looks, even if it looks crap, I mean, that doesn't have to look like shit, but don't spend too much on design, because if then the expectations don't match the design, it's like, wow, nice front end, but there's no features in the back. So why so shiny, right? What's your take on this? When's the right moment for a company to start really spending on fine-tuning the design?
Yeah, there's a couple of points on this. So as a business mind, I would say straight away, obviously I want to work with you. I'm a designer, just spend the money.
What's your incentive, right?
Exactly. In reality, I agree with you. I think I think it all depends. So if you have something that is really shiny, it attracts users. Maybe, I don't know what your user base is going to be and what type of product you're going to sell. But if you are targeting for other designers or people that really appreciate good taste, maybe have something shiny, because then you want them to, I don't know, sign up to your newsletter for when you launch your product, even if it's like an MVP or whatever. But I've had really recently as well, I think is an interesting question that you asked there, because recently I basically left a startup that I was consulting for, because I felt my design skills were not needed, because the developers were blockers. I could provide as much design as I wanted, but then we had no chance of validating that the design actually made sense. We could do so many phone calls with potential customers and show them, oh, the app might look like this, but then we had not enough time and developers to basically make that a reality. So I said, you know what, guys, I'm going to leave you. You go ahead, develop what you basically can and what I provided you with, and then come back to me in 6 months' time and say, okay, well, now we validated what we really want, and then we can design on top of that. So that to me is the best way. Like I like to be upfront and I like to be clear. Just I don't want to hang around. I could have stayed there and got paid for the time that I spent providing 100 prototypes, but I didn't feel it was right for the startup, even though they were like Series C, they got funding, got through Y Combinator. So, they had the money, they could spend that money. I just didn't want to take that money because I felt it was unfair for me to do that.
That's very honest from your side. Look, we got a signature question on this podcast that we're nearing the hour of conversations.
Wow.
We've been riffing here for almost an hour, which I'm super appreciative of your time. But we got a signature question, which is, what's the most expensive fuck up you've ever done? Of course, in your field, in UX UI. Like, can you
Oh,
quantify
man.
it in money?
Oh, that's that's a difficult one. UI UX in terms of things that I messed up, probably nothing that I can think of. The only one I can think of, obviously, was the Bamboo one. Never taking a percentage of the investment money that they offered. That's a big fuck up.
Yeah.
I think I calculated a while ago, and I think when they were at the highest, because they IPO'd, so
Yeah.
they went public, right? So I could have got my shares then, and I think it was like something crazy, like $20 million or something like that.
Oh, Jesus. Well, that hurts.
I know. That's what I mean. I'm like, no. So that's definitely a big fuck up, but not quite design related. It's bad.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, but
not
it's
done.
good enough. But like, in hindsight, right? Maybe, you take that money and you become rich and then you get run over by a car. So you never know. That's
Exactly, you never
what I
know,
always say
yeah.
about like the multiverse, right? You never know. Just don't
Exactly.
speculate on that. Look, Fabio, super thank you for your time. 1 minute for you. How can we help you back? Your projects, your community, yourself. How can we help you?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I can't even believe it's been an hour. Really enjoyed this. But yeah, so I'm on Twitter. That's my most active account. At triple FABS, so FFFABS, that's Fabs. I post a lot of stuff there. That's where I'm the most active. That's it. So I'm there. Just follow me or ask me any questions if you want about design. I'm also working on a startup. If you know investors, specifically on the sort of like the like a CRM SaaS type of like angle, more than happy to chat and give you a few basically ideas of what I'm working on.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.